Gustavo voluntarily chose to become the father of a set of 6 twins whom people had disregarded. After a decade, the most unexpected truth about them came to light. On the way back home, Gustavo glanced in the rearview mirror. 4 of the girls were seated in the back of his truck, while 2 sat up front with him. The 4 girls behind were not speaking. Neither were the ones in front. The car was silent, as if heading to a funeral instead of their new home. Their expressions were not even happy. They were just numb and neutral, the kind of expression one wears after enduring many disappointments, no longer bothering to cling to hope. Gustavo had just come from the orphanage, where he had signed all the papers and assumed full guardianship of the 6 twins. They were now his adoptive daughters, and he was their father. He liked to consider himself a father without the adoptive part, as he never intended to see them as anything but his own. Gustavo was the kind of person who either committed fully or not at all. He had accepted these girls as his own and would never backtrack on that decision, no matter what. The 6 twins had been in the orphanage for 5 years. According to the caregivers, they had become orphans at the age of 4 and had lived in several orphanages since then. Their story was tragic, and it was this that compelled Gustavo to adopt them. It might have seemed like an impulsive decision to others, but Gustavo felt very certain about the choice he had made. The girls were 9 years old, all born on the same day. Gustavo found this incredible. They were the first set of twins he had ever known, and he was sure they would probably be the only ones. None of the girls looked alike, but they all had a strong resemblance to each other and were incredibly beautiful, even at their young age. Gustavo found it strange that they had not been adopted. This was before the caregivers shared the tragic story of the girls with him. The girls had been transferred to different orphanages. The first orphanage that took them and housed them for 1.5 years, the longest period they had stayed in any orphanage. During their time there, the girls were scared and showed signs of trauma. They underwent child therapy for a few months before they began to speak, play freely, and relate to other children. Shortly after, many couples showed interest in adopting the girls. None of them, however, were ready to adopt all 6 together. Instead, they wanted to adopt 1 or 2. The caregivers understood that 6 girls would be difficult for anyone to take in and considered it a blessing that they were adopted anyway. They thought that perhaps after 4 couples adopted 1 or 2 girls, all of them would be adopted. But the girls refused to be separated. They cried, refused to eat, and made a scene whenever any of their sisters received an adoption offer. They did this several times, and their caregivers became frustrated. The caregivers decided to try another method. They approached couples who wanted children and suggested that they live with the girls for a while to see if they could adopt all 6. The first family the girls lived with, the wife detested them. After a few weeks later, claiming that the girls had stolen her husband's affection, she returned the girls to the orphanage. The orphanage then transferred them to another. The second orphanage also sent the girls to live with another couple for a short period. All went well, but then the wife of the household became ill in her 2nd month of pregnancy and blamed the girls for her sickness. She alleged that the girls were witches and wanted to harm her and her unborn child. In order for them to be the only children in the family, the girls were returned to the orphanage and eventually transferred to the 3rd one. Like the first 2, the 3rd orphanage sent the girls to live with another couple. This couple was religious and well-regarded in the community. Unexpectedly, valuable jewelry and money that they kept for others went missing. Instead of admitting their fault, they accused the girls of theft and severely beat them as punishment. At the time, the girls were 7.5 years old. They united and secretly planned to escape, which they successfully did. They went to the police, who interrogated the couple. Investigations revealed that the woman had a gambling problem. The couple's reputation was destroyed, and the community unfairly blamed the twins. The hatred towards the girls was so strong that they were transferred to an orphanage out of state. At the 4th orphanage, which closed after a few months, they went to the 5th. Several issues arose in various orphanages until they arrived at the 9th, where Gustavo found them. Everyone was exasperated with the girls and wanted to get rid of them. The orphanage director said they still had a chance to be adopted, but would have to be separated. The girls were sad and looked at each other fearfully. They did everything they could to stay together, but it didn't work. They would have to say goodbye. It was at this critical moment that Gustavo entered their orphanage. Gustavo was a florist hired by the orphanage director for his services. Important sponsors of the orphanage would arrive in a few days, and the director wanted to make the environment colorful and attractive with flowers. Gustavo overheard the director telling the girls that they had reached the end of the line and would have to go separate ways. The girls' reaction touched Gustavo deeply. He knocked on the director's door and entered the office, telling the director that he had a large house where all the girls would be welcome. Gustavo was a black man, and the girls were white, but this did not intimidate him. He was ready and willing to take responsibility for them. The orphanage administration was relieved when Gustavo confirmed that he really wanted to take the girls to live in his house. They asked him some questions to confirm that he was eligible to be their guardian. Gustavo was a widower living with his 50-year-old mother, and both earned a reasonable amount of money that could support the whole family, including the girls. The orphanage offered to pay Gustavo a monthly amount for caring for the girls, but he refused. He told the administration that he was not taking the girls for a trial run, but to be their father. He wanted to adopt them fully. Everyone looked at him as if he were crazy. Little did he know that these girls were hated, but they still allowed him to adopt them. A few weeks later, the adoption process was completed at Gustavo's house. Gustavo's mother, Evelyn, was excited to meet the girls. She loved children, and Gustavo had already told her their story. She felt their pain, having been through so much at just 9 years old, and wanted them to feel at home and comfortable. The twins were her long-lost granddaughters, finally home. She was determined to help raise them well. Evelyn had another reason to be so happy about the girls' adoption. Gustavo had been alone for 5 years since his wife died in childbirth with their baby. He hadn't dated anyone or tried to start another family. He simply lived with his mother in their 5-bedroom duplex on the outskirts of town. He tended to the flowers he supplied for his business on that land and had a small garden too. Since the day the girls arrived at the house, Gustavo provided for all their basic needs and any additional needs his mother told him they had. However, for weeks, the girls remained withdrawn and quiet. They said thank you at the right times and only spoke when spoken to. No more, no less. They acted this way because they were cautious. They had lived with many people in the past who were initially kind to them but ended up becoming unkind. Neither Gustavo nor Evelyn liked how reserved and uncomfortable the girls were, but they didn't know what to do to change it. They continued to treat the girls well, gently correcting them when necessary and asking about things they liked. Though tired of the girls' monotonous responses, they did not give up on them. One day, it paid off. One of the girls accidentally broke a family heirloom that Evelyn was very protective of. She was so scared that she wanted to run away, believing that Evelyn would beat her and kick her and her sisters out because of it. But Evelyn entered the room, saw the broken heirloom, and rushed to the girl's side. "Are you hurt? Is there any bleeding? Do you want to see the doctor?" Evelyn fired off the questions in rapid succession, her eyes scanning every inch of the girl to make sure she wasn't hurt. The girl was surprised that Evelyn didn't scold her and was genuinely interested in her well-being. She burst into tears, and Evelyn enveloped her in a warm hug, consoling her. After this incident, the girls saw that Gustavo and his mother were truly good people who cared about them. In the following months, the girls opened up to them and began to behave like a real family. Some of the girls helped Evelyn with household chores and in the kitchen, while others learned about flower cultivation and gardening from Gustavo. They helped him take care of the flowers, and as a result, he was able to grow more flowers and have a bigger garden. The best part was that the girls really enjoyed participating in these activities. They didn't do it reluctantly. They were so joyful whenever they did something, and that warmed Gustavo and Evelyn's hearts. Once, Evelyn organized a bake sale for an event, and some of the girls made so many different things that they sold out quickly, with many people asking for more. They made a lot of money and considered starting a bakery business. Additionally, more clients contacted Gustavo Gustavo managed to sell all the floral orders because there were more flowers, and he began to earn more money as a result. He often surprised the girls with thoughtful gifts. 2 years after the girls started living with him, Gustavo asked if they wanted to do something special, and they all said they would like to go on a camping trip. Gustavo rented a van and made the necessary arrangements for a one-night camping trip. He wanted to keep the distance short in case they didn't enjoy the experience and wanted to return home faster. However, he and his mother were in for a big surprise on the trip. At the campfire, the girls sang a song together. Each of them had a distinct voice that blended perfectly and harmonized effortlessly. Evelyn and Gustavo were speechless. They had no idea the girls had this talent. As soon as they returned from the camping trip, Evelyn went to the choir leader of her church and asked her to train the girls to sing better. When the choir leader heard the twins sing, she loved the idea. The girls were excited to have a professional to guide them and help them improve their singing skills. They loved singing together but were too shy to do it in front of Gustavo and Evelyn. They started training 4 times a week with the choir leader. This lasted for a whole year before the choir leader started writing them to sing at local events and festivities. The girls continued to practice and improve constantly. They could sing many styles very well and performed for Gustavo and Evelyn. A few years later, when the girls were 19 years old, a major competition arose. At this point, the girls had completed high school. 3 of them wanted to go to college, while the other 3 wanted to pursue careers in business and other interests. The cash prize from the talent competition was huge and would support all of them in their endeavors, so they decided to enter. It would also be the last time they hoped to sing together for a long time. They put their heart and soul into preparing for the competition, choosing to do in a cappella style. They practiced long and hard to get it right. When they finally performed at the competition, it was an instant success. Both the judges and the audience gave them standing ovations. Clips of their performance went viral, and they won the competition, becoming sensations on social media. A major record label approached the girls and offered them a very lucrative recording contract. They responded that they would consider the offer. A few days later, while the girls were still considering the offer, a stranger appeared at their door. She was beautiful, elegant, and her style was sophisticated. It was Gustavo who answered the door, and he thought the woman was there to make an unforgettable offer to the girls. In the days prior, they had received numerous offers to model for brands, endorsement deals, commercial agreements, and much more. Everyone wanted to capitalize on their growing success. However, the woman told Gustavo that she was not there for any of that. She asked to be taken to the girls. Gustavo wanted to refuse her request, but her eyes convinced him. They were kind and sad. 10 years ago, Gustavo had adopted the girls, and years later, he would discover a shocking truth about them. As everyone sat in the living room, the woman introduced herself to the family as Luana, the biological mother of the girls. There was an audible gasp in the room as she shared her life story with them. Her parents were poor, illiterate, naive people who married her off to a much older man in exchange for money. The man wanted an heir and was ecstatic when Luana became pregnant, but he grew annoyed when complications arose due to the multiple babies she was carrying. He was irritated because Luana had to be hospitalized for weeks, and he had to foot the bills. The girls were born prematurely by cesarean section. The hospital celebrated their birth by not charging for the extended weeks the girls spent in the incubator. However, Luana's husband grew angry that all 6 babies were girls. Worse, the doctors did not allow him to impregnate Luana again for years because her body needed to heal. He began to mistreat Luana, but she endured it because of her daughters. However, when the girls were 3 years old, he started drinking and became more violent. When the girls were 4 years old, she took them to an orphanage and left them there as orphans. It was the only way to ensure that the girls were cared for, as Luana had no way to provide for them. She had told the girls to stay together at all costs and that she would return to find them. For years, Luana survived by doing humble jobs. She worked in a small inn and gained the sympathy of the owner, an elderly lady who left her the establishment when she passed away. Luana turned that business, through sheer willpower, into an exclusive resort. She then returned to find her daughters, but they had disappeared. It was through videos of their performance in the competition that she finally found them. The girls lamented everything their mother had gone through and reconnected with her. Luana recounted that their biological father had passed away. One day, he got drunk, fell on the wrong side, and broke his neck. Luana thanked Gustavo and Evelyn for their kindness to her daughters. They talked for a long time, and she invited everyone to spend a month's vacation at the resort, including Evelyn and Gustavo. Luana had given birth to the twins when she was 19 years old, and the girls were already 19 years old, making her 38. She had not remarried or been in a relationship since. Gustavo was 43 years old and also single. During their time at the resort, they felt attracted to each other, and the girls not so subtly began to play matchmakers. Eventually, Luana and Gustavo gave in and started dating. A few months later, Gustavo proposed to Luana, and she accepted. They got married, and Luana moved in to live with the man of her dreams, where she had 6 beautiful daughters and a loving mother-in-law.